England beauty, right? What you've started to see is the English waking up all over this country, and you've started to see the English flag. Right? The English flag represents you, everyone here, and just before I go and say anything else, I want everyone to understand one thing. Nowhere in the English Constitution does it mention race, right? Nowhere. So when people start having a little pop, and I've got some books over there which I'm going to show you, right? And I'll briefly talk about slavery, just to make sure you're all aware. White people from England, Ireland, Cornwall were taken as slaves by the Barbary pirates. It's where we built our navy, right, to defend our people. Over 1.5 million of us, far more than anyone that was ever put into black slavery, right? And it was the English that stopped slavery, not the British. Once you understand the history, if you understand who Grenville Sharp is, if you understand Somerset versus Stuart 1772, and you read the history of it, you understand it was the English that stopped slavery, not the British. Right? In fact, the British wanted to carry on. So this is just to let you all know, we are no longer muted, and more people are going to learn that we have a constitution that protects us, and our ancestors put that in place. So again, there's the muted flag. We're no longer muted, and people are seeing all over England that we're waking up. So again, I'm going to park that one, hopefully. Very attractive assistant. Right, so where do we start? But normally I start the seminars by asking simple questions. And simple question this is where the interaction comes in. How many of this audience consider themselves to be British as opposed to English? Or Scottish or Irish, right? How many people regard themselves as British? Put your hand up. If you don't be shy, by the way. If you think you're British, by the end of this, you won't be. Right? How many people think they're British? I'll tell you what. I love it. How many people believe they're English? Put your hands up. Right. So almost every single one. Right? And then there's the odd person who doesn't quite like it. But I want everyone to understand something. The English, believe it or not, we was one of the only countries that allowed foreigners to come in and used to forgive them if they breached our laws. Right? But again, this is all in our history, it's all written in our history. The main reason that we do these seminars is to teach people that you have a constitution. How many people here have been told they don't have a constitution, don't have a written constitution? How many people think that and have been told that? So loads of people are putting around that, right? That's a lie. And it's a lie by politicians and what we call the ruling classes that want to remove the knowledge of what actually protects you as subjects in the realm of England. You are not citizens. So again, I will be talking very briefly on the difference between a country and a unitary state, which is what the British are. A unitary state is not a country, and it says that in the law books. England is a country. Scotland is a country. Northern Ireland is a country, right? But not the UK. The UK is known as a unitary state. And the reason why it can't be a country is because there's two separate jurisdictions. The first jurisdiction is the common law of England and Wales and Northern Ireland, and funny enough, Southern Ireland as well. Scotland is Roman law jurisdiction. It's the same jurisdiction as the European Union. There is a plan. The European Union have been very honest for the last 30, 40 years. They're not the ones lying to you. Your own politicians are the ones who are lying to you. What is their plan? It's called the Five Presidents Plan. I'm not going to go into massive detail. What I will tell you now is in order for their plan to be fully operative, they need to regionalise England into 9 regions. They need to make them regions into administrative regions. In other words, Essex does not exist anymore. Essex used to be a kingdom in its own right. And you're not being told what's actually going on. So once you become the East region, and Colchester becomes the head of that region, you are in an administrative state. Once they have carried that out, you all know where the other one is, don't you? London. Right? So if you want to know what's going to happen to Essex, look at London. The main point, and the reason I'm telling you this, is because once you understand what their plan is, that your politicians, that means the Conservative and Union Party, the Labour Party, the Lib Dems, and everyone else out there who's a unionist, have lied to you, and they are seeking to destroy the future rights of your children and your grandchildren, and I don't care whether you are black, white, or brown. Right? You are English. And the English Constitution protects you and your future generations, which I'll be going into when we get to these documents at the end, and a trust document that was put in place so they could never take these rights. And you've all been lied to. We go back to the earliest parts. So one thing you've all got to realise, by the way, I'm going to mention this, I'm not going to mention it briefly. There's issues currently all over Essex and all over England, particularly in England. And one of the things they didn't like was a certain lady stood up and she went out to speech. And in that speech, she mentioned a convention parliament and the English Bill of Rights. And the fact that the English and the English Bill of Rights is superior because it came from a convention parliament. That's this document. They don't want you to know that exists. They've tried to erase it from your memory. And they've done it over the last at least 80 years. I've traced it back to 1815. It's a long-term plan to destroy England. So again, you have problems in Essex, in Epping. A lady was arrested, she read out a speech. She showed, unfortunately, a British flag. She was arrested. But the speech is what triggered them. Because in that speech, she spoke of England. If you then go and look at all of the media that played the speech, they started to edit out where she started talking about the English Bill of Rights. Someone else called Rupert Lowe. Everyone heard of Rupert Lowe?
Yeah.
Only politician to stand up in Parliament and say, we have a Bill of Rights. Right? A week later, he's gone. He's no longer in the Reform Party. Right? That is what they're trying to hide from you. And that, which was an extension. And these books, to prove to you, is in there. And what I'm going to do is go through it. So first major part everyone needs to understand. But by the way, when we get to about, someone will have to time me because it'll go on forever, 2 o'clock, we'll have a break, get some more drinks, do what you've got to do, and then we'll come back and then we have a questions and answers. And then bar's staying open, and you can have a chat and do what we've got to do. But there's some really important stuff to get through first. So we're not going all the way back through Anglo-Saxon history, but what we are going to be talking about is prior to the Magna Carta of 1215, so there's one before that, actually before it, there's something else that existed, which was the Charter of Liberty of 1100. That was the main charter that gives you important, and the charter, by the way, is a statute. But there's certain groups of people who don't believe that. It's because they don't understand the law, and they don't understand where the law comes from, right? So the Charter of Liberties, then you had something called the Charter of Forest. If I went through the 15 documents, we'd have to go all the way around this place, and you'd all be looking and saying, wow, and then you'd say, I only say to people, they say to me, I should say this, they say to me, we haven't got a written constitution. No, sorry, we haven't got a constitution. So I always say to them, if we haven't got a constitution, then why do we live in a constitutional monarchy? if we haven't got a constitution, how did the monarchy come about? How did our courts come about? How did our parliament come about? We have a constitution. And then they say, we haven't got a written constitution. So what I do then is say, here's the Habeas laws of England. Here are all the laws contained. And again, this is Habeas laws of England, 4th edition, volume number 8, constitutional laws. You all agree that's quite a thick, sizable book. It's written as common law. Then there's another one. Habeas statute, 4th edition, volume number 10. Nice big message right across the bottom of that. Constitutional law. And as you can see, there's quite a few elements of that. Because I use that mainly in court. And open these books up, and when judges say we haven't got a constitution, I'll say, what's that? And if a judge says to me we haven't got a Bill of Rights, I say, well, can I just read it from our constitutional statute? And I have done that. So again, they will say to you, meaning those, these people, they will say to you, we haven't got a codified constitution. Many of these are codified. This has actually got 13 wrongs and 13 rights. The most often quoted one of these, Article 9, is freedom of speech in Parliament. The problem they've got is this document says all and singular. Every one of their rights is still your right, including the right to keep and bear arms for self-defence. They can never take it off them. And if you wanted to prove to you that that's right, in recent times I've had 2 people get not guilty, and they've alleged they've got an offensive weapon in a public place. They come and spoke to me, they was our members, right, and said this is what they charged me with, and they're going to give me 3 years. Right? No previous convictions. I wrote out stated using the English Bill of Rights and other parts of the law, meaning literally it's called stare decisis, where you use precedents that have been used in the past by the courts, and showed that one person was discontinued, and the other person, the judge, went to call in the jury and said, "What's your argument?" He said, "My argument's the English Bill of Rights." Right? And the judge found him not guilty, and that's that. Right? But you're not told that. You're not told that by your solicitors, British. You're not told that by your barristers, British, right? Because they are removing your rights bit by bit. But they're not just doing it to you, they're doing it to your future grandchildren. And unless you stand up and understand what this means, they lose everything. And we don't want to be that generation. So again, you've seen that the books exist. There's another great one here. Select statutes, cases and documents, this one's about 200 years old, to illustrate English constitutional history. It's got all the major statutes in there. Guess what? Original, without any idiots. You can actually read what the law actually says, not what they try to cheat and make it mean something that it doesn't. So they lie to you. Before I go any further, I'm just going to make sure I show you these, because these are important. There's something called the Hamlin Lectures. The Hamlin Lectures was a lady solicitor in Devon. When she died, she was very wealthy. She created. So what I'm trying to tell you is you can go and read this yourself. Right? You don't have to just listen to me. These lectures were put into trust, and the most senior people in law were to come along and tell normal everyday working people like me what the law is. So again, Sir John Law's Hamlin Lectures, the Common Law Constitution, fantastic read. Again, you've got trial by jury. So now you've got all them idiots that tell you, oh, we're only doing this for common law. I'm not even going to get involved with the people. Right? Go and read that book. Right? Most people don't even know that women weren't allowed on juries until 1919. Right? So if you want to go back to how it was in 1215, trust me, you can't. When you read that book, they tell you the absolute truth. And juries as we know them today are not about in the terms of the Magna Carta. The juries that we know them now are about 180 years later. So again, that's trial by jury by Lord Devlin, one of the most famous experienced judges. The first lecture was given by Lord Denning in 1949. It's called Freedom Under Law. I recommend everyone reads it because he's one of our greatest judges. And just to make sure you're all clear on this, he's English. He was for the English working class. He actually said that. The only time an Englishman gets a fair trial is when I'm on the bench, right? Even on appeal. He's one of the, in the this going back 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, one of his clerks, getting on a bit, contacted me and said, Tom would have loved you. Constitutional fundamentals. Sir William Wade, right? People never hear about him. Instead they hear about this other person who wrote this book, which is A.V. Dyson. Anyone heard of A.V. Dyson? He wrote 2 books. I never tell you about that one. That's an original, where he changed his mind and said Parliament is not sovereign, the people are. Right? But they never refer to that book. Right? So he changed his mind. Again, what I do is show people evidence. Someone else, Sir William Wade. The reason I'm showing you these, so you understand, you can go and read about it. I'm just a normal everyday person. Right? So, again, I've read all this. Constitutional fundamentals. Sir William Wade, one of our greatest scholars. Just as equal as A.V. Dyson. And what did he say? He said Parliament isn't sovereign. The Constitution is sovereign. The rule of law is sovereign. And the people are sovereign. Right? So all of that information is in there, and all you've got to do, apart from watching my shows on Rumble, is go through that. So, again, we're going to get back into this. So in 1215, we had the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is actually the Magna Charta is the Great Charter. That's what it's referred to as 1215. There's 4 variations of it. But one thing that people do need to understand is the Magna Carta, the original 1215, can never be repealed. I think you might have to speak to Stuart beyond the bar to work out where the seats are. I'm not sure where more seats are. So again, you've got the Magna Carta of 1215. You cannot repeal it, right? The major point is you cannot repeal it. And why can't you? And why can't Parliament repeal it? Because it was out of the jurisdiction of Parliament. Parliament hadn't been created until 1275. Right? So Parliament was later. It can't repeal something that wasn't within its jurisdiction to do. Right? There's various other things that people say about the Magna Carta. One of the things you cannot do is you cannot repeal it. And Parliament itself, if you look at Hansard, has admitted that. But now we cross over to one, there's another one that's got to go up there, which is the first statute of Westminster 1275. In particular, Chapter 5 is still in existence, which protects your elections, which we've just used in the High Court, by the way, and I've acknowledged it's still in existence and it's not been repealed. So the point being, that when Parliament, that particular Parliament, what you should all understand, and especially because of the rapes going on all over this country, the English, because the British didn't exist in any form, the English in 1275, as part of the first statute of Westminster in 1275, guess what it said? You cannot, by law, ravish a woman. Ravish means rape. Right? And if you do, you will be hanged. Right? So the first people to bring in a rule protecting women globally were the English. And what have we got now? Our kids being raped all over this country, and yet the English, or some of them, are waving the British flag that took that right away. So when you see the English flag, remember that the English flag means England as a country. When you wave any other flag, you are not waving the English country flag. You are not English. If you want to support the Union, that British Union flag is no different to the European Union. And guess what? The USSR, which was a unitary state. same person who created Soviet in 1948. Again, moving to Magna Carta. So when they first talk about the Magna Carta, by the way, much of this is still law. But what I'm going to do is read some of this and then explain what it means, and then show you in the law books where it says it. Magna Carta, and again, you're going into that one, imprisonment. So this is 10, 20, 19, what's that, 21, no, 29. Imprisonment, etc., contrary to law, administration of justice. No free man shall be taken or imprisoned, or be deceased of his freehold, or liberty, or free customs, or be outlawed, or exiled. So you can't be exiled from anywhere. If someone tries to ban you from Essex because you're protesting, you can come back to that and say you can't do that. Right? And this still stands in law. Or any otherwise destroyed, nor will we pass upon him a condemning but by lawful judgment of his peers, meaning the jury, or by the law of the land. Two separate things. Right? We will sell to no man, and we will deny or defer to any man either justice or right. There's various other things. That's still in effect. There's certain elements that still in effect, but really and truthfully, the original Magna Carta is still in full force. Now, some people say that this, on its own, is our constitution, which is rubbish. Right? We're going to go forward. Everyone's heard of Peasants' revolt. Yeah. Well, let me ask a question of the audience, because this will always be happening. Do you know where it started?
Fobbing.
Where?
Fobbing.
No, it finished there.
Fobbing.
It started in Brentwood in Essex.
Close enough.
It started in Kent, decided, again on the orders of the Chancellor, to take taxes off the people of Essex. And one of the things they did is they went to Brentford and stuck their fingers in young females that they weren't wanted, right, to check and see if they were virgins. Right? The dads come out, pulled out a sword, whopped the head off the king's men, and then there was a bit of a fight in the village. They sent more soldiers, all of the men come out with their swords and done a whole lot of them. That's what started it on. But it was because the king's men were interfering with the women in the town, and it all started over tax. Then it went from Bedford, crossed over, different places, Norfolk, everyone started to get together. They had the internet. Right? They crossed over the river in Erith, travelled down through Kent, picked up some more people in Canterbury. I'm talking about normal tradespeople, normal working men. Right? Kicked them back up with their arms and their weapons. Guess where they went? Rochester. Guess what happened, people? The system decided to take one of them and bang him up in Rochester Castle. So the people said, fair enough. They surrounded the castle and laid siege to the castle and said, unless you let him go, we're going to do the lot of you. Right? Drawbridge drops down, out he walks, right? And they said, right, come on. And then they carried on all the way up to Blackheath, when they then converged on London. And there was quite a few battles in London, but they killed a number of people within the system. Right? There's lots of things that happened after that. It's a whole event that went on for quite some time. But Wat Tyler was really one of the last to die. Why did he die, by the way? Do you know? Because the king had done little deals with people in the background. They all went, we got what we want, walk away, right? Wat Tyler and the group from Kent was left there, and then they got killed. Right? So they should have stuck together until everyone got what they wanted from that revolution. So that was a peasants' revolt. From that we move forward. What we're really going to be talking about today are the things that are happening now. I've got to make sure I've got enough time to do it. Something called the Glorious Revolution. Right, so again, in certain books, this book is about 40 years old. It was written, and it's called the Declaration of Rights 1689. What people don't realise is the Glorious Revolution, William was asked to come to England. Right? And there's all these people say he invaded, etc. He didn't. Right? The king lost his bottle, threw the English seal in the River Thames. Off he went in his little rowing boat, got all the way to think it was something like Ramsgate, where the people had gotten away to it. They captured him, asked should we send him back, and the people in London said no, because he lose his head, let him escape. So they let him go, they didn't want to top him. But King William and Mary had already landed in a fantastic place called Brixham in Devon. Right? And by the way, Queen Elizabeth II went down here on the 300th anniversary, and then she made a speech in Parliament and told everyone that the Bill of Rights is still law, and it is the foundation of our democracy, right? and that the judiciary is separate, right? Which is not what you're seeing at the moment. So the reason why these books, the Bill of Rights, so let me make sure I get this right for you. The Glorious Revolution produced a trilogy of protection, right? The Declaration of Reasons, that no one talks about, the Declaration of Reasons. Right? So it was what King Billy read out to the people why he was here. He had been asked to come, and then he starts to tell you the story, and this is archived. The weirdest thing possible is like reading about what's happening now, except the names have changed. It's exactly the same thing. Right? The next part of that was something called the Declaration of Rights. The Declaration of Rights is what's this about. They never tell you about it, they never talk about it. The Declaration of Rights is a contract, and it is the original contract between the king and the people. Right? It was known as a kingdom without a king at the time. There was no king. If there ain't no king, there ain't no parliament. So what they did was they got together the people, and it's called a convention parliament. It's the most powerful thing in the country. In law, a convention parliament is the most powerful thing there is. There is nothing more powerful. And what they did is they had a debate and discussed it, and there was 27 heads of terms. By the way, I've read every one of them. The heads of terms in a contract, they explained what the problem was, they explained what the solution was, and then the king had to agree to it. And there was an agreement, and that's called the Declaration. Everyone heard about when he was in Westminster Palace, and they read the Declaration of Rights, and him and Mary agreed to the terms. That's the only reason it's the king. But forward, the only reason you've got a king now is because of that Declaration of Rights. It's so crucially important, people don't understand. But there's 27 heads of terms to it. If they go against any of them terms, you have got something called the private right injury in private law, which is what I specialise to push forward. In America, they know all about it. But here, you're poo-poo. There's no such thing. It's a lie, and they're lying to you. So that's the Declaration of Rights. How do you move on to that? Before we get to the Bill of Rights, which is crucial, which is public law, they took the Declaration of Rights, so that it's a private contract, and they needed this. It's called the Crown and Parliament Recognition Act 1689. Still law today. It has to be law. And there it says, King and Queen recognise the acts of the said Parliament were and are laws, statutes, and are to be obeyed. Right? Then it tells you all the details. You can go, but literally, read this. And that enactment created the Coronation Oath Act. If anyone wants to understand exactly what this says, it's more detail, but again, you've got to understand what it is. So, an act for the establishing the Coronation Oath Act. Right? So that means that the Crown, they must take this oath. Otherwise, they take two oaths. That oath means they can never go against you or your rights. And if their authorities, meaning their servants, not yours, meaning Crown servants, by the way, people need to understand this, police constables are Crown servants. They're not public servants. We don't live in a republic. We live in a Crown monarchy. Therefore, police constables they're individually liable, and we've already won this in the High Court, by the way, and we showed their own documentation to show it, police constables take an oath. They can't be a police constable, just like a king, unless they obey the laws of the land. And if they go against the laws of the land, for example, arresting you, assaulting you, doing any of them things, you've got a private action against them as an individual, and you can bring proceedings against them criminally, or something else called contempt of statute and contempt of sovereign. Right? You're not being taught this anymore. 100 years ago, you was taught this in the school. But now they removed it. When did they remove it? Early 1970s. Why? Because we went into the European Union. Why did they remove it? Because that document there has got a supremacy clause. And in the supremacy clause, what does it say? No one can have power over the English but the English. So the European Convention of Human Rights can have no power over you. The European Union and its Council can have no power over you. It's all in that. But they didn't want to talk about. So they removed it from your education, and by removing it from your education, they remove it from your children's education, and then no one has got any rights. You become slaves. That was protecting you from becoming a slave, part of the debt system that they now operate. So getting back to the Coronation Oath Act, once you've taken this, once the King has taken this, and there's two parts of the oath, the accession oath and the Coronation Oath Act. By the way, he's the defender of the faith. The faith means the Protestant religion, right? Not the Roman Catholic religion, not any other Christian. The Protestant faith and Presbyterian. That's where the Scots have got equal protection because they've got the claim of right, 1689. If the King goes against this and you petition the King, I'm not talking about Article 61 of the Magna Carta. There's a petition system that you need to do. Once you put that petition in, if you petition Parliament and they ignore it, you petition the King because he's perjuring his oath, a serious offence under the common law of England, right? They top you for it. If he's gone against your petition, the law of England says you, as the people, are entitled to armed rebellion. Because it is your duty to England, your future generations, and your ancestors to rise up like your ancestors did before you. It tells you in that. It actually says it. But they will deceive you. So without getting back into that, I'm going to go straight over to the English Bill of Rights. An act declaring the rights and liberties of the subject, rights and liberties of the subject, and settling the succession of the crown. But when you come down and you have a look at exactly what's been said, this document and the original, I've doctored this slightly, I won't go into that on this session, but it says, the heads of the Declaration of the Lords and Commons recited. Remember I told you about the declarations? 27 of them. It then tells you this is a history of exactly what's going on. Whereas the late King James II, by the assistance of the diverse evil councillors, judges, do you mean they're crooked judges? You are. What? You can't have them. None of them are crooked. Surely not 400 years ago. They're just as bad as the ones we got now. Right? There it is. Judges and ministers. What, do you mean ministers are crooked and doing all these strange things? And back there they was, yeah. Even then, employed by him, they're employed. Judges are the Crown's judges. They're not your judges, they belong to him. Parliament belongs to the Crown officially. That's where all this comes into it. If you go against your oath, the whole lot's gone, we'll take it off there. Right? You either do what we want and keep things nice, or we'll come back at them. By him, the endeavour to subvert and extirpate the Protestant religion and the laws and liberties of this kingdom. So it's telling you again, every one of these documents, if I went through the history of every one of them, you'd all be going, well, this is all law, why are they doing this to us? Because you've been denied the knowledge, right? If you don't know that you've got them rights,
And you just say, if a police officer here comes up and says, yeah, you can't go to that protest, I'm going to tell you to move. Well, if you had hundreds of you that turn around and say, hang on a minute, that's against my Bill of Rights, that's against the Magna Carta, that's against the Constitution of this country, you're the one doing wrong. By the way, if a police officer pulls that baton on you, you have the right to arrest him for assault. Because if you've done nothing wrong, assault means a threat of violence, right? Then you have the right as a citizen of England, it is your duty to arrest that person. And they never tell you that. What they don't like about me is I go around telling people, you understand, if they draw a baton on you, they handcuff you for no reason whatsoever. So let's say they turn up, I'm not being funny, but you get these idiots who say, oh, you're under arrest like that, right? It's unlawful to put handcuffs on you. It's assault, right? But instead you're going like that, right? They have to have a reason to put handcuffs on you. It's assault. If you're not, so these little old ladies, you see that 10-year-old kid they handcuff, right? There's a simple set of reasons why they were allowed to handcuff you. Let me tell you something, there ain't a kid in this world that I would need to handcuff. Right? There was another one up north. I believe she was a 9-year-old child. Listen to this, they tasered her. Right? They tasered a 9-year-old child. I went mad. All I said was, as a dad, right, she had a pair of garden shears. I said, I'm telling you I could use my voice without touching her and she would have dropped them shears, right? Everyone knows that if you've got good parenting skills, you know your voice changes, your kid goes, woo, like that, right? My dad's 95, if his voice changes, I'm going, like that, right? He's 95. So, people must understand that you've got lots and lots, and I can't go through them all, but you will understand this is an extremely powerful document. It's different to the Declaration of Rights. The Declaration of Rights is called private law. It's law in contract where the Crown has contracted, and it's called the original contract. Even within Blackstone, and again the Institutes of England, where he talks about English law, goes all the way through that and explains all your laws. On this, that's called public law. So public law and private law, I talk, everyone heard of the term belt and braces. So where you put a belt on and you have braces, you've got no chance of your trousers falling down, right? They're doubling up the Declaration of Rights and the Bill of Rights, private law, public law, you ain't losing your rights. So how do they do it? A bit like a magician, they just don't show you anymore and teach you. By the way, the Acts of Union says these rights must be communicated to the people. Right? If you've never been taught it in school, by the way, if you do a law degree, they don't even teach you this. That's why I've said to people, before you become a judge, a solicitor or a barrister, you need to do a 2-year minimum, which we're designing, course on fundamental constitutional law. Everyone knows that a police officer prior to 2008, before he took the oath to become a police officer, he had to take in a constitution. By the way, he wasn't allowed to have access to the public unless he was supervised as a probationer for 2 years. Right? All gone out the window. He had to take, at the end of 2 years, he had to take the constitutional exam. And if he didn't pass it, you couldn't be a police constable. They took it all away, and now what they've got is what I call the Red Guard. So the Red Guard just not tried, they're idiots. They stick them in a uniform, and not being funny for women, but they're putting all these women in uniform, right? If you get 10 geezers and 1 woman, police officer, right, you've got no chance of controlling 10 men that want to have a fight. Right? Whereas in the old days, there was police officers that I knew could walk in, like I said with my dad, they could just use their voice and the geezers would step back, right? And they respect the fact that that cop is going to say, I'll take one of you out, and that one will do lots of birth. That's the way they used to do it. But getting back to, now this is a really important one, the Act of Settlement, the 1700, says 1700, that's when it was put in place. There's a reason why this happened. Now, what it says is Act of Settlement, an act for the further limitation of the Crown and better security and better securing the rights and liberties of the subjects. So you've got a trilogy, the Declaration from the Glorious Revolution, the Declaration of Reasons, the Declaration of Rights, the English Bill of Rights. They had a little bit of a gap, right? And only about 20 years, 18, 20 years, some things went pear-shaped, and they then needed the Acts of Settlement. And what that was an extension of this. Some people in law, scholars, tell people that that's more important than the Bill of Rights. In some ways, I think it is. At chapter 4, guess what it tells you? It tells you that the laws of England are your birthright. It tells you that in laws. That can never be removed. So your birthright, you've got heir rights to all of this. The Bill of Rights at the original chapter 3 and chapter 2 protected this in the future. The original part of this protected the Magna Carta, protected the Charter of the Forest, protected every element of your English rights going back centuries. Was all protected by these documents from the Glorious Revolution. Yet they've erased it from your memory. Right? So when you look at that Act of Settlement, there was something in there. This is the bit that people often say, wow. It said, you cannot be a member of Parliament, you cannot be in the House of Lords, you cannot be a police constable, you cannot be the frigging Mayor of London, unless you are born of English parents. Right? Double, again, belt and braces. 2 parents must be English. If they're not English, you can't have any authority over the English. That was in that document. It was in there. Not for racial issues. You're going to love this. King William was Dutch. Right? Mary was actually Scottish English. Right? But King William was Dutch. Moving some people in. King William was a good guy, but he started quickly authority in Parliament in positions of profit, right? They started taking liberties, started getting greedy. Right? So the English started to rise up. Again, the King really said, I'll tell you what we need to do. We'll make sure that there's no Dutch in positions of power. Right? I don't know anyone knows any Dutch people, but they look just like me, speak a different language, right? But they're the same race as us. What they said was, you cannot have them people in our Parliament because they're going against our English liberties. Right? And they started doing all these things in the background. It's a fascinating history. That's what they did, and they created that. So skipping forward to after the Second World War, in 1948, they created something called the British Nationality Act, 1948. Guess what? Hidden in the depths of that law, without any of you knowing, that's a constitutional statute, an entrenched statute. It's been there for years. In 1948, under the British Nationality Act, Schedule 4, buried in legislation, they repealed the part that says you have to be born of English parents. 3 years after the end of the Second World War. Why did they do that? It was an Attlee government. The Attlee government and the Labour Party are communists. They took control of England with that one tiny little bit to take that out. That's why you've got people like Diane Abbott. Right? Listen, I ain't got a problem with black people. If you've got a black person that's been here 3 generations, and I had this discussion, I'm not going to get into it, I'm not an eco-nationalist. Right? So, I'm a constitutionalist. As long as the Constitution says you can live there, I ain't got a problem. As long as you've got an allegiance to England, not British, England, I ain't got a problem with it. Right? As long as you abide by English law, by the way, this is a Christian country, whether you like it or not, right? That is what I live by. So, what we did is expanded all of that, right? And made sure, so the British Nationality Act was what started the attacks. Actually goes back to 1947, but 1948, we lost the war. To make sure you all aware of this? Earlier on in history, there was another guy, has everyone heard of Joseph Stalin? Joseph Stalin he was the commissar of identity in the Soviet Union, and he created an identity and a nationality called Soviet. That was copied by our Labour government and brought into the British Nationality Act. That's why I'm saying if you wave that British flag, you are actually waving the flag of the Soviet Union, and you don't even realise it because of what they've done. It's got nothing to do with the colour of your skin. It's got to do with what they've done, and it's the politicians that are lying to you. And by the way, the slow march through the institution started with academia for a reason. Where do all these people, solicitors and barristers and heirs, they do speak so well, right? Where do they go? They go to university. The universities were infiltrated first, and then they removed the knowledge of the Constitution and the laws of the land from there. Right? It happened with the Hamlin lectures. Cambridge University took of Exeter University, who had control of their online lectures. Cambridge got hold of it, disappeared off the internet. Unfortunate for them, there's a group of people called the English Constitution Society, which I'm president of, and the English Constitution Party, which I'm the leader of, and said, we're not having this, that's our right to access. Right? Trustees said we didn't know anything about it. Contacted Cambridge University and said, you put them lectures back online now. Right? And the whole lot come back up again. And everyone was saying now we've got access. Because you can learn. Right? That's my job is not to fight your battles, by the way. It is to empower you to understand you have a constitution. Right? And there's plenty of us now that are either coming up to retirement or retired, right? And all of a sudden you can get your nut into that, and then you're saving your grandchild in 30 or 40 years' time. That's what you should be looking at doing. So again, making sure everyone understands, Joseph Stalin created Soviet as a national identity because it was the USSR. Just to make sure everyone gets it. What happened in 1991? The Soviet Union was dissolved by a signature. Guess what? The unitary state of the USSR, the Soviet Union, no longer exists. What do you think would happen? There's two ways to do this, by the way. What do you think would happen if we void the Acts of England? You go back to being England, just like Russia has. England, Scotland, Wales is part of England. But again, if they want self-determination, I haven't got a problem with it. Right? But the main part is all these places go back to what they was envisioned, which is countries. They're not part of a political unit. Right? It is the politicians who've done it, you know. Again, the European Union have never lied about this, they're quite open about it. It's your own politicians. But because you're in Essex, and you come from Essex, you need to all understand something. Essex was its own kingdom. And all of a sudden, it's no longer there. Did you all know that there was a group of people called the Essex Rifles? You ever heard of them? They actually fought off, believe it or not, Napoleon. Right? There was an invasion, they all went back. This is where the right to keep and bear arms comes in, picked up their rifles, went down to the bench, started taking pot shots at the invading force. Can you see any of that going on in the English Channel at the moment? Right? If you even pick up a catapult, you'd be arrested, let alone pick up a firearm and start shooting at them. So everyone needs to understand that side. But before I go on, so there's much more of this. There's about 15 of these in total. You need to do a full, you'd have to be in quite a large area to play every one of them and go through it, and it takes hours. And I've got to be conscious of time. But we are going to get through this. So don't forget, I'm going to go for probably a 2-hour questions and answers. That's the interesting part to me, by the way, because I'll get all sorts of questions. But let's go back to this in the middle. Don't forget, you can come up and take photos of any of these books. And by the way, if anyone's ever seen my show on Rumble, by the way, I've just been banned again on YouTube. They don't like me on YouTube. They don't like people telling the truth. So again, we're going to get back into this. Everyone should understand, take photos of these. By the way, you can buy these second-hand individually. If you buy the second-hand ones individually, they can be quite cheap, about 30 quid a book. You try to buy the latest set, which I'm on the book. It's about £7.5 grand for a set, and there's 2 sets, so it's 14 grand before you even start. You don't need all of that, you only need the constitutional books. So you can concentrate on that. Even a single book in the latest edition, if I remember rightly, it's about £700. Whereas you can get one of them for about 30. And then you've got, don't forget, you've got 2 separate books. Howsbury Statutes of England, Howsbury Laws of England. What's the difference between the two? Anyone know? One statutory law, one common law. So if anyone says to look, people say common law doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. But so does the statutory law and statutory defences, which is why a lot of these people get in trouble. They call themselves legal experts, but they don't need. I mean, I don't believe in the European Convention on Human Rights. I think I'm the only person actually related to it. The only person who ever been negotiated with the government in the European Convention on Human Rights. So it's not as if I don't even use the European Convention on Human Rights, but at Strasbourg, I actually got a negotiation with the British government. Right? And again, when you talk to these other people, anyone comes to the court, they use it. So I mean, most people say I'm completely different. I'm not like I am on my show. I'm talking to 2 high-court judges. Having your leadership, and you just talk to them. But your job as an advocate is not to aggravate the judges because you want them to make a decision. You do. Right? You don't go in there and say, read me your own. Tell me what you're open. I'm not saying anything. I've got a legal fiction. My legal fiction is my certificate, my birth certificate. What do you think the judge is going to say? If you keep on like that, we'll hold you in a contempt and send you to the cells. Right? And they also say there's no law. Right? If you get up there and say, relationship, right? I'm not saying this is true. Someone says she had a soft spot for me, right? Because I was just talking to her. Everyone will know this, the King's Council was so boring, both judges just rolling their eyes. So when I got up and said, this is me, they were like, oh, now we can listen to a normal person. Don't have judges. They will go on your side, even a magistrate. We've had magistrates with us. Magistrates are people just like me and you. And as long as you say it the right way to them and don't aggravate them, they'll find it in your favour. And they're quite powerful in what they can do. I mean, we've had quite a few non-buildings. And again, it's never publicised. By the way, I don't charge. I only take on strategic cases. I'm not a solicitor, I'm not a barrister, I'm a constitutionalist. And I teach people about the Constitution, that's it. But, let's get into this, because this is where you can briefly go through it. So at the top there, you can see an English flag. Below are the common law constitutional rights belonging to the English. Right, so everyone, I'm really pleased to see everyone says they're English, right? So it seems easy to explain this to you. Right. The realm of England and its subjects to defend themselves. Where does that come from? English Bill of Rights. Guess what? It was in pre-existing rights. That's what people don't understand. The English have always had the right to arm themselves in self-defence all the way back to Anglo-Saxon time. You go and read the Anglo-Saxon laws, which are, this one I love. If you harm a women's children, right, so in other words, the mum, right, and you've got the children, you hurt her kids, she has the right to stop you, in other words, kill you, right, and no one can prosecute her. And I was like, oh, I love that. Why have we still got these laws, right? Because the mum is the protector and the educator in the family. It was always that way in England. The dad went out and earned a living and done whatever, but the woman was the one who protected the family. A right to a jury. Does everyone know that they're trying to cancel out juries? Yeah. Right. Did you know that they took out grand juries in 1929? The way you used to keep the ruling classes and hold them to account. Because everyone knows you've got grand juries in America.
Yeah.
They got it from us. But the British removed grand juries. It was the way that we would bring people to justice in this country. We could call on a grand jury, and then the way a grand jury works is you put the prosecution evidence forward, so the guy ain't there. That's why they call it a sealed indictment, right? And then you put it to the jury, do you believe there's enough evidence to arrest? Right? So if you get an indictment from the grand jury, it's the most important. It means it's an arrest warrant from your own people. That's what a grand jury means, right? And what they're actually doing by giving an indictment is saying, this is more used in America, but it should be used here, it's called probable cause. So it's not saying you're guilty, because you haven't given your defence yet, but what they're saying is that there's probable cause. In other words, there is evidence to say you committed this offence. And then you get an indictment. And then you get the opportunity to go through another court, and then they call in the jury and they listen to both sides of the evidence. They cancelled that in 1929 in England. They removed that from your right system. That's how you could have pulled all of these politicians. You could have had them in front of a grand jury and held them to account, overruled them. We'll get to who in a couple of minutes. Everyone knows that you've got the right. I've got to tell you this one. You've got the right to remain silent. So why is it that people, when they get arrested, oh, well, I haven't done anything wrong, and I'm going to say this and I'm saying that. Right? As soon as you open your mouth, you sent yourself to prison. Lucy Carnley sent herself to prison. Then people who pleaded guilty on the advice of their British barristers and British solicitors, right? Speak to someone like me. Not one of them would have done a day's work. Not one day behind the door if they'd had me sitting in there with them. Or even if they'd spoken to me first. Right? As soon as a police officer comes up to you, and don't mess about with certain things, and again, free man of the land nonsense, right? The copper comes up to you, he's got to have reasonable cause that you committed an offence, or a statement from someone that you have committed an offence. If you haven't committed an offence, you've got no right to be talking to you. If they arrest you, they'll read you out exactly what you've been arrested for by law, and if they don't do that, the whole thing's thrown out, right? They have to tell you what you've been arrested for, and then they say to you, and I'll give you a couple of examples of this, they'll say to you, if you've got anything to say, you just say no comment. They'll take you off, if you're unlucky, put you in a cell, they'll bring you into interview, right? They sit you down on interview and you say, no comment. They'll ask you questions, say no comment. They'll come up to you and they say, all right, well, you want a cup of tea, mate? And you go, yeah. You answer one question, they put to the judge. He's answered some questions and not others. They read out all of the incriminating questions that they've asked you, and all of your no comment, including, what about tea, mate? Yeah. Right. That's what brings that in as evidence. If you say no comment to everything, they can't do anything. Here's the beauty of it. Some people just stare at a mark on the wall. Right? This comes from experience a long time ago. Right? The other way, if you want the interview to be over and it's a woman, right? Interviewing her, it's a male or female, but if it's a woman, right, just stare at her tits. Make her feel uncomfortable and she will not want to continue with that interview. You get up, switch the tape off and walk out, right? But when you've got knowledge of what that interview means, if you open your mouth, let me tell you something now, these books here, they're tiny little pages, really thin, right? There's thousands of laws. They need you to open your mouth once and they will find something to make you for, charge you for, put you in a cell, don't see a dodgy magistrate, you won't get bail, right? Shut up. Do not say a single word. That's it. If you have to spend 3 days in a prison cell, ask Lucy Carnley. Right? Would you rather spend 3 days in a prison cell? By the way, food ain't that bad, right? Or do you want to spend 3 years behind bars? Because as soon as you open your mouth, As soon as you employ a British solicitor and a British barrister, you are gone. Right? And yet people still trust them. They're all feeding off the system. You are just a process of that system. They don't care about you. Right? When you go to prison, Mr. Policeman goes home at night, walks in the pub. You're the one banged up. Shut up. Do not say a word. Right? Ask anyone who knows me. Right? If they arrest me, you can ask my ex-wives, you see a few of them. Right? Don't say anything. Literally, nothing. And if they bang you up for 2 weeks, won't let you out on bail. Shut up. Don't say anything. And then all of a sudden you'll get an application, you've got to have a good brief, or someone like me that will put in a habeas corpus rep and say there is absolutely no evidence, this person has remained silent, there's no reason to have him in prison, this is political, they release it. But you've got to have someone that does it for you, not these other people in the background. We like to govern ourselves via county, district and parish council. Do you all understand that regionalisation is removing parish council? Local councils, a whole lot. The reason they're doing it is because they have to make it into an administrative state or an administrative region. Why are they doing that? Because once they've removed England and there's no common law jurisdiction anymore, because it's all administrative state and administrative law, you're the same as Scotland, right? They then take you back into the European Union. There's no common law jurisdiction in the European Union. The European Union can now call itself a country. But you've just lost yours. That's what they're planning. They in excess of 40 years. Right? So again, it's all part of what they're doing. The right of property freehold. Any freeholders? Yeah, you're not. Right? So you're not freeholder. There's only one true freeholder in this country, and that is called fee simple. Fee simple means you own everything under the ground and all the way up in the sky. There's various things. It's more likely to get fee simple in America now. Right? But in 1998, they removed property law rights. Why did they do that? It was with the Leasehold Act of 1998, I think it was, the year. And let's say you've got a freehold property, you lease it to me, I'll come in on a rent agreement, I live there for 2 years and I say, I want to buy this cat. You say, I don't want to sell it to you. I can force you to sell it to me, but I'll take you to the court under a Leasehold Act, so you ain't got no rights to freehold with me. I can come along and go, bang, and take it off. Yeah, even with your own property. This is English law that's been butchered by the communists and the British. Right? The right to full freedom of navigation and trade. Everyone remember the COVID? Acts of Union tells you, and so does these other laws. You can travel anywhere in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Ireland, and the Dominions. Some people won't like this, and what do they call them? The plantations. We ain't got any plantations anymore, right? But the plantations, many of them, weren't as bad as what people said. They were like work colonies, they were controlled more by the British than the English. And the English dominions meant that they was completely independent, right? It changed in 1706, 1707, and that is why the Americans, who were actually the English, turned on the British. So by the way, it's not the first time it's happened. So again, full right to full freedom of navigation and trade, right? That means, just to give you an example, if someone said to you, you cannot do a protest in Epping, that goes against your constitutional rights. You never ever hear a solicitor or barrister argue that. Right? I can tell you now, it's a fundamental right. You can travel anywhere. When they put bail conditions on you, right, for no apparent reason other than they want to say that you cannot travel to Kent, or you cannot travel to Essex, or you cannot travel to Shropshire, that is illegal. They cannot do it. But no one's challenging it. Right? Imagine if we had all these people here with that little bit of knowledge, and all of a sudden you went, you can't do that. And you stood up as a person. By the way, it only takes one person to challenge it. I mean, they're finding that out now in the High Court with me, with the Runcorn and Helsby election. Only takes one person to stand up. I know the law, because by the way, you can represent yourself. You have standing. If they do that against you, you've got a voice in that court. The right to bring up and protect our children. Anyone heard of the family court? Most evil people God ever put on this planet took complete and utter control of everyone and all families, right? The state can now put a guardian in place for your children, even though you as parents are still alive, and if the state want to switch off your kid's life or terminate your kid's life, they can. So there's nothing you can do about it. That never used to be that way. These people have done that, right? So again, the right to habeas corpus. What does habeas corpus mean? Show me the body. If you're in prison for something, or locked up, or let's say Stuart decides he didn't like my seminar this afternoon, so he locks me in the cellar, right? One of you would say, Graham Moore is being held in the cellar by Stuart. And he'll say, well, what for? He didn't like the seminar, right? Apart from calling the police, obviously, right? And you can actually get, one of you can go to the High Court, put in a habeas corpus writ, they can serve the writ on Stuart. Stuart will have to grab him by the short with hers, and take him out to the High Court. That's what habeas corpus writ means. So you have to produce the body into court, and then the other side has to explain why it is they're holding him in custody and whether or not it's, and the judge decides whether it is lawful custody or not. And if it's not, they release you. So it's a habeas corpus writ. And if you read Freedom Under the Law Handling Lectures by Lord Deming, he tells you in that all of the work that the judges do, the most important is habeas corpus. If we get a habeas corpus writ on our desk, everything else gets cleared. We only work on the habeas corpus writ until we've solved that problem. That's how powerful it is. Judges say habeas corpus, liberty and freedoms of the people is the most important thing. And if you read Freedom Under the Law, you would get a massive generation of what actually is going on. That the pretended power of suspending laws is illegal. Why is it? Bill of Rights says it. Declaration of Rights says it. So in other words, you can't have people saying, well, no, that law's not in place today. I had it up on the COVID, during COVID, when the police officer, there was a load of riot squad, was walking towards us. David, what's his name? Curtin was there. Right, he lost his arsehole. Right. So they're walking towards us, full right kit, and I'm standing there with a Bill of Rights. And said, we have rights. We've got a Bill of Rights, they're in full force, right? Imagine having riot squads just stomping towards us with their shields, with their mask on, and there was this sergeant that went, not today, eh? Right? It was all on video. That's an offence. It's also a criminal offence for him to say that. So the right to assert English ancient rights and liberties. You have all got the right to assert your ancient rights and liberties. Don't be shy. Right? Everyone here, again I'm speaking to the men, especially someone when they was a bit younger, listen, my God loves a trier. Unless you go and ask for her phone number, she ain't going to give it to you and she ain't going to show you're interested. Get over your shyness. You've got rights. Stand up for them. Claim your right. Tell them, I have got a right. And if you want to take it off me, I'm going to pursue you. Which is what we're doing currently in the High Court with another case. And then people are like, well, I thought it was only Chief Constable. No, that's what they tell you. The law says they're personally, individually liable if they commit a tort against you. What do you do then? You put a written against them, and the private right injury, you have a claim up, you ask for a jury, you must do that within 28 days, right? Single individual copper, not the Chief Constable, you take his ass off it. You see how much power you've got? No one does it. No solicitor, no barrister will tell you you've got that right. Oh, this is the practice. right to assert English rights and liberties. Pretended power of dispensing with laws is illegal. Again, that's another slight right. There is a case I can quote you on that. But the right to petition the monarch, commitments and prosecutions for such petitioning are illegal. Right? Most of you, or some of you that know me, will know quite a few years ago, actually it was 2018, that apart from the fact that we arrested Sally Khan in front of thousands, 3,000 people, I petitioned the monarch outside Parliament. So it was about 30 of us. Right? It's all on camera, it's still on YouTube, probably enough. It's on my channel. Right? So there's me standing outside Parliament, there's loads of Americans there, yeah, I'm talking about the English Constitution, etc. That 30-year-old girl come along, all their cameras on, and they said, you can't do this. I said, 2 weeks ago, I put a notice in, I literally done a recorded visit to Buckingham Palace, just so I could prove that I was doing it, and I've done it the right way. I put in a document to Buckingham Palace to sign for Buckingham Palace, and said, I will be petitioning on this day outside Buckingham Palace. Kept it all. Went outside, people started talking, I said, this is a petition to Her Majesty the Queen. Some people put little memes out with the Queen looking out of the window with Philip at the time. It was quite funny, and that's how old Daddy Dragon did. Let alone switching the curtain, right? So the old bill nicked me. Right? So there's me having an argument with the Chief Superintendent, 2 inspectors, load of sergeants, and they arrested me, handcuffed me, dragged me off, threw me in the back of the van, took me down to Cannon Street, right? Finally released me later on that night, gets taken to court, goes to the court, it's Westminster Court in London, one of the worst magistrates in the country, it's the worst magistrate in the country. So the judge says, by the way, there's probably about, number one copy, there's about 100 people in the gallery supporting me. So again, this is where you have standing, so I can represent myself. So the judge said to me, Mr. Moore, what is your defence? So I held up a copy of the Bill of Rights in full as an authority, and the Coronation Oath Act in full as an authority, that said I rely on those 2 documents for my defence. And the judge said to me, is this going to be a constitutional argument? I said, yes, sir, it is. Right. So they turn around, so the judge is now looking at the CPS, and says to the CPS, have you got any video evidence? Listen to this, 30 police officers, all got video cameras. Just looked up and said, no sir, there's no video evidence. So he said, what, you've got 30 cameras and none of them work? No video evidence. Sat back down. The judge has said to him, okay, we have a statement from a police officer. Right? She stood back up, she said, no sir, there's no statement. So he says, so there's 30 police officers, a superintendent, 2 inspectors, 4 sergeants, and all these police constables, and there's not a single statement from these people. Oh, no sir. Right. She sat down again, and he went, oh no, stand up. So she stood up. He said, what are you going to do? She said, we offer no evidence. Right? The whole place erupted. Right? And everyone started cheering. I was just stood there, looking at him. Then he said, oh, this was funny bit, he shouted at the public gallery, this is not a pantomime. And one of my mates shouted back, oh yes it is! And even the judge thought it was that's Gabby, funny enough he's from Essex. And the point I'm trying to make to you is the judge then said to me, how much does it cost to bring your 5 witnesses and yourself to court today? I said 350 quid. He said, I award you full costs. And he said, I'm telling you now, pay them that. Right? Literally, he said, pay them that. Write the cheque out and give him that money. Right? Because otherwise it goes full from system course, and they literally sent me a cheque, 350 quid. So I won the case on the Constitution, right? But the police officers completely illegally, why didn't they have their cameras on? Why didn't they write a statement? It tells you there. The right to petition the monarch, commitments and prosecutions for such petitioning are illegal. So all of a sudden, they're going to get nicked. You can't do that to a subject to the ground. If they're petitioning the monarch, which I was doing, it was quite obvious, it was all on camera, I'd already put in a notice to the king that I'd be standing outside Buckingham Palace petitioning. Right? If no one says you have to do a petition, don't write your name on something. Petition means making a demand. And that's what I was doing. So anyway, that caused them a massive problem, and it proved that if you rely on the Constitution, there's nothing they can do. The election of members of Parliament ought to be free. That's what we're in court for now, today. Right? I run in Runcorn and Hillsbury. Right? Who's the main person going against us? Sarah Patchin, isn't it? Why would she do that? It was a crooked election. The whole thing was crooked. We just won. I won against 2 King's Councils, 2 barristers, and an army of solicitors backing them up, right? And then it was just me standing there. Many people here was probably at that court case, right? In front of 2 judges, and they found with a 32-page judgment and 84 paragraphs of law, they said at the end the petition goes ahead. In other words, Mr. Moore has won. They hated it. Less than a week, and trust me, I've seen some of my skeleton argument. He said, I've done my reading different stuff, right? He said, that's the best skeleton argument I've ever read, right? So we're just pushing it forward, and we hope to win. If not, we'll win in other ways. The election of members of Parliament ought to be free. What does that actually mean? Right? Doesn't mean you ain't got to pay £500 deposit. It means there can be no skullduggery. No one is allowed to influence you. The police are not allowed to intimidate you. Right? They're not allowed to intimidate your campaign, which is what they've done with us. Bearing in mind, we stick up for disabled people and pensioners. Right? We're the only people that do. And there was a very lovely gentleman sitting in front of me when we was actually in the High Court. I just finished my part of that we stand up for people with disabilities, and we stand up for pensioners. Actually, you know, the door clicked open, and in comes a gentleman and his wife, who's actually sitting in this old audience at the moment, with his white tapping stick, and with his hand on someone's shoulder, and I looked up and thought, thank you, God, I couldn't have got a better entrance for the judges to look and go, he actually means it. That's what he does. Right? They stand up for the disabled, which we do. Right, so there's a lot of people in Runcorn and Hillsbury.
Yeah, I'd be a fiver for that.
We'll buy you a drink. The election of members ought to be free. So you're not allowed to do anything. You're not allowed, so when the returning officer and gets his little helpers, so just to give you, imagine the returning officer is like a magician, and there is an illusion, and he uses his helpers, or the accountants in the council, and they're the magician's assistants, and they start switching votes and putting votes into other piles, and you think that's highly illegal, it's fraud, right? And it's also malfeasance in public office, which carries a life sentence, right? There's lots of things, that's why they're fighting us, because they know if we get the petition trial, we can prove they cheated. That means returning officers can go on trial for 2 serious offences, right? And they might be going to prison for a long time. That's why they're fighting. Guess whose money is backing him up? Your money. For council tax. They wouldn't. They wouldn't. So again, they are using your money via council tax to defraud you at an election. And you're the ones paying for their legal defence, right? Which is a terrible thing to be happening. There's lots of things I can say about that, but I won't go too much into it. I'm going to write this one. The levelling, don't forget, these are all your common law rights. There's many more of them. These are the basics, right? But levying money, income tax, VAT, European tax is illegal. By the way, we're supposed to have left the European Union. It's a load of bullshit, right? You shouldn't be paying VAT. No taxation without representation. Well, why are you paying VAT then? And by the way, on average, going back about 10 years ago, there was 8 billion of fraud in VAT, called carousel frauds, right? Where missing trader fraud. And the government admitted they had no way of knowing if someone was being fraudulent. Why would you want to pay that tax if you're giving criminals $8 billion? Your money, right? And they just, because it's not their money, they don't care. It was a slice of the top. Commissioners for the international causes and all other commissions and courts of like nature, Sharia, for example, are illegal and malicious. I'm not going to ask if there's any Jews here, right, or any Hindus. I don't think I'm picking on Jews or not, or even Muslims. Right? Any religious court in England is unlawful. You're not allowed to do it. The reason why is because you get religious fanaticism, whether it be Jewish, whether it be Hindus, whether it be Sikhs, whether it be whoever it is, and particularly Roman Catholics. Right? The reason I say that is because a lot of that is about Roman Catholics, not the Roman Catholics themselves, it's normal everyday people, the Jesuits. Right? Are not very nice people. Right? If you read their life, you'd understand what I'm saying. So what that means is you can't have Sharia. Everyone knows we've got something like 80 to 100 Sharia courts in this country. Highly illegal. We actually went to an event in London through the Selden Society, which is another group that we belong to, and Lady Howe was giving a lecture, and during that lecture we asked some questions that made her flip. They turned the cameras off at the end because she didn't like my questions, and she didn't want to answer them, she didn't want everyone to see that she couldn't answer the questions. It was quite funny, right? But Lady Howe, she was asked that there was a Muslim barrister there, lady, and the Muslim barrister said, when are we allowed to have full Sharia law in this country? Lady Howe said, you can't. She said, why not? She said, it's forbidden by the English Bill of Rights. Right? It's not me just saying it, I'm telling you, it's unlawful. Why have we got them there? Shut them down. Right? It's in our laws, you can't have that. But it's not, so I want to make sure I'm saying this right. I'm not picking on Muslims. Right? I can't stand Sharia. I've got to be honest with you, I can't stand the Talmud either. The Talmud, which is Jewish, there are two types of Jewish law. The Talmud's even worse. Right? Worse than the Sharia. Right? And people don't even understand it. But if you say that, right, you're an anti-Semite. Well, I'm not an anti-Semite. Right? So when I'm saying to people, I don't like their religious laws, if you want to live in England, drop your laws out. Right? You live by the Constitution of England and our laws, which says you can't have someone locking. Remember what I said to you earlier about Stuart locking me in the cellar or whatever? Well, they locked this in because Christians in this country, if you didn't turn up to church, they locked you in the vestry. You might be in there for 2 days. There was all sorts of shenanigans going on with bishops and all that because they had the power. What that was brought in for was to neutralise that power. So you just lived your life without religious intervention, end up in front of. If you have your tongue, then he'll deal with you. That's the way they brought it in. And to be fair with you, most people are genuinely nice people. But all grants and promises of fines, forfeitures of particular persons before convictions are illegal and void, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Everyone understand that? You can't be talking. We've got torture press in this country that no one even knows about. The press will even talk about it. Did you know that my fee, when I do hit the government, is £1,888 an hour? So when I'm in cases, they don't raise it. Do you know why it's £1,888 an hour? Because 1,888 of us have been killed by the police in custody, and not one thing has happened to them people. Tortured, died in police custody, put on the floor, handcuffed in a prone position with 4 geezers on his back and suffocated. That's called torture. Right? Not one of them police officers have ever faced justice. They broke in Hertfordshire's a man's shins for nothing. Snapped his shins, dragged him out of the car, not one of them went to prison. That's called torture. We've got laws that protect us against that. No one is bringing it up. Right? The only people who fight back are people in the English Constitution Society and the English Constitution Party. because the British say, thin blue line, we love our police. Right? When you realise the people they're employing are not your friends, right? And anyone who ever gets arrested, you've got to be very, very careful with them. Not just that, but all promises of fines, right? So when they was giving people, I've got there's some funny things happened during COVID. The amount of people that come and see me who said, I've got a £10,000 fine, I can't pay it. I said, sorry what it says. I said, tick box, tick that box. They ticked that box. I said, sorry, I said it back to you. He said, it says I want a trial. I said, yeah, you do, and I'll be representing you. I'll see what happens. He sent it back. Come back and said, no further action. Oh, how many people take a fine? All you had to do was tick the box and say, I want a trial. They give so many £10,000 fines out, right? They couldn't cope with it, so they squashed them. But some people, hey, I couldn't believe it. Why didn't you just believe the 10 grand? And I would have fought it for you. Right? Speeding cameras, I'm not going to go into detail about this. Speeding fines. You know, for the speed cameras. That was actually brought up in Parliament at a constitutional committee where they admitted it was against the English Bill of Rights. They're not allowed to do that. But everyone says, I'll put the points on my licence, or worse. Right? If they ban you from driving because of them, they're stopping you earning a living. And yet people are just suffering it. There's no loss, no harm, no injury, no fraud. If you haven't, and there was one chief constable not so long ago, about 10 years ago, in County Durham in the north of England, right? He actually switched off all the speed cameras. And he instructed his police constables, if you see someone speeding, stop them, pull them over and advise them to speed through. Right? That's what they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to arrest you for anything. Because you haven't caused anyone any harm. Right? They sacked you. So you've actually got people that do stand up for you. Bosh, they're gone. I've told you how much they get in pensions and handouts when they retire. Anyone self-employed. The average chief constable gets just under £500,000 immediate payout, tax-free when they retire. How many of you want £500,000 when you retire? Right? And in 2/3 pension for the rest of their life. That's why them people are now taking liberties with us, because the government forward drives them. Right? It's called communism. So that was roughly covered. Don't forget where we started from. The English rights, below a common law constitutional right belonging to the English, right? It's all your rights. And that for the redress of all grievances and for the amending, strengthening, and preserving of the laws, parliaments ought to be held frequently. But recently it was once a year, did you know that? Well, that's what the Glorious Revolution said, then it meant every 3 years. Right? Do you know what every 5 years means? That's part of that's communist takeover your country. Communists do 5-year elections, which are a complete and utter, is the sequencing. It's five-year sequencing. Right? But no foreign. Oh, this is the one we're going to love. Right? This is, you remember I said in the Bill of Rights of why we can't be in the European Union or the European Convention of Human Rights? Because this has got a supremacy clause that says that no one can have power over you. Right? Only us. So then you go, that no foreign prince, person, prelate, state or pontificate have or ought to have any jurisdiction, power, superiority, preeminence or authority, pretty clear, isn't it? Right? Ecclesiastical or spiritual, right? So Muslims can't tell you what to do, the Talmud can't tell you what to do, Sikhism can't tell you what to do, Christians can't tell you what to do, ecclesiastical or spiritual within the realm, so help me God. Why is that important? So help me God. It's called a solemn oath. Solemn oath is really serious. It means if you perjure that, right, perjuring a solemn oath is akin to treason, because you ain't just called treason to the people, you have insulted God himself. Right? That's why that's such a serious thing. In English law, I'm talking about solemn oath. By the way, the same thing exists. People don't believe this, but it's true. With marriage vows. If you take marriage vows inside the church, You are making a contract not only with your partner, but also with God. That is why you can never be divorced. That was the big argument with the king when he divorced his wife, and they said, you took the vows in the church, you can't do it. And then he said to the church, no one will be part of your church, and it's a little bit Protestant. But what I'm saying is, a solemn oath is a different oath. Right? There's more options like that. So again, just make sure you all get that, and you can all see that. Above are the common law constitutional rights removed by the British. It was the British that took them all over. We haven't got an English parliament. We have no English MPs. Right? There's Scottish MPs, there's Northern Irish MPs, there's Welsh MPs, there's British MPs. You haven't got a single English MP representing you in that parliament. That is why your country has been flooded with immigrants and rapists. Because there's no one to find your corner in that parliament. With the lows come that boast. Right? He actually mentioned the English Bill of Rights. He spoke of England. But he's been brainwashed into believing that British unitary state is the way forward. It isn't. If you want to save the Union, all you have to do is void 20 acts of Parliament that we've highlighted, reverse engineered how they go and took that hours ago, right? And one of them is the British Nationality Act. Does everyone here understand that you cannot, you can see from the audience, how many of you get annoyed that you cannot write on an official government document when it says what nationality you do? You're not allowed to write English, it only says British. Most people get annoyed at that, right? Because they're English, they're Scottish, they're Welsh, they're Irish, they're Cornish. I mean, again, I ain't got a problem with the Cornish people being completely independent. I believe in self-determination, and by the way, so did Jesus Christ. He was against the Roman Empire. So once people understand where this all comes from, British is an extension of the Roman Empire. We've traced all of this going all the way back. Did you know that the Roman Empire, including the Jesuits, believe that the British Isles is a province of the Roman Empire? They do not believe in England. They believe that the British Isles is a province of Rome. And it's an extension of that. And that's what you're fighting against. But none of you have been taught it in school. So again, that's basics. What I don't want to do is go on too long if everyone wants to use the book. What we are going to do is have an answers and questions sessions. Don't forget, you will ask me questions about different things you can do, right? We was really active during COVID, right? Including writing a will letter to the schools to say that you could not jack kids because it was against common law of England. It was because of that letter, and legally it was absolute perfection. I'm not just saying that because I drafted it. That letter went into certain schools, and there were certain people with us that went in there, the grandparents. 3 copies, one to the former governors, one to the classroom, mistress of the school, one to the form tutor. And in there it said, we're holding you personally responsible if you stick a needle in our kid. Right? That letter then got published by the Daily Mail. Right? 2 days later, the government retracted the whole thing and stopped kids being injected, all because of our letter. So if you think people like me, or you, can't do anything, think again. You've only got to use the power of the common law of England and the constitutional rights. And you need to stand up and challenge. Shut down their system and tell them, I'm English, I'm not British. What does that say so? I speak English, not British. By the way, what did President Trump do? Becoming the President of the United States of America for the 2nd time. Executive order, we said the official language of the United States of America is English. Big bold letters. He sent another one out. What did it say? The Bill of Rights of the United States of America was written in English. Put that on that. He's digging all the time. He's telling their people, maybe the British regime, right? We know what you've done. You've attacked us in the past and you're doing it again. And we're going to put a stop to it. Now you started seeing the indictments. I'm not going to go into Trump whether you like him, you dislike him or whatever. I quite like his daughters to be honest. But I just see him as someone who's not part of their system. And they don't like it. And that's it. And who's going to do a lot of other things. So, if we have a break, and then we'll ask questions or whatever, I think there's probably a couple of things I think. I don't do, just to make sure you're aware, I never do these events scripted. Different people ask me different questions. It can be different subjects. But what we need to do is make sure, my job is to empower you to understand, and I'm hoping you will do. So if I said to you now, do you have a constitution? What would you say?
Yeah.
You understand you've got one?
Yeah, absolutely.
The books are there, it's written, it's codified in various places. England has been a nation since 927. The British have only existed for 300 years. Within 70 years of the British being in existence, and when I say British I mean the absolute Union, they attacked America 70 years after. Who did they attack? They attacked the English in America. And they stood up and said, when the British said we want your guns, they stood up with their guns and said, come and get them. Right? And then they said, with true English style and blood, we want the rights of an Englishman. And they fought for it. And they fought for independence and they got independence. Right? I believe in self-determination. These people have took the piss out of us enough. And the English need to stand up and take back their country. Right? So if you have got that, what I'm going to do is say nothing before I do anything else. Apart from the obvious is one thing that we do is we tell everyone the Constitution is the solution. Here's your English flag, you can have it. We don't want that pile of shit on the bottom of there. You've been brainwashed into believing it. And again, there at the front is the mega. We've had these for about 5 years. Mega, make England great again. So, from our point of view, the English Constitution Society, the English Constitution Party, which is the political element, right? The Constitution is the solution. All you've got to do is go back to the same problems our ancestors had. Deal with rights on our website. I'll publish it. And if people are looking for it and say, you know, so that would stop this, that would stop that, that would stop this, and I'll say, yeah, it will do, but they won't listen to you unless you all start pointing it out. So remember, our ancestors handed you the eternal flame of freedom. For you to hand it to the next generation. What I'm saying to you and empowering you for is don't let us be the generation that fails, that extinguishes that freedom. That's it. But hopefully everyone's enjoying it. So don't forget to go to the bar and make it really so busy that they're having a nervous breakdown.